The Etherean High Council chamber, a monument to sterile efficiency, pulsed with controlled energy. 12 figures, their silver skin shimmering under the ethereal glow of the artificial suns, were locked in a silent debate. Councillor Zorgan, his voice a low hum, broke the quiet. Their advancements are concerning. Quantum entanglement achieved decades ahead of projected models. Their weapons, primitive, yet rapidly evolving. Councillor Lyra, her crystalline eyes reflecting the holographic image of Earth, countered, their self-destructive tendencies are equally alarming. 8 billion individuals consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. A volatile species. The Grand Architect, a being of immense age and perceived wisdom, raised a hand, silencing the chamber. We have observed countless species across the galaxies. None exhibit such contradictory behaviors. They are both a potential threat and a source of curiosity. He paused, the unspoken word, opportunity, hung in the air. Specialist Raina Alistar will assess them. Her objectivity is unmatched. A door materialized in the shimmering wall, and Raina entered. Her violet skin, a stark contrast to the council's silver, radiated a subtle energy. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, framing a face that was both beautiful and intimidating. Her emerald eyes, flecked with gold, assessed the council with calculated precision. Specialist Alistar, the Grand Architect acknowledged, you understand the gravity of this mission? Raina bowed, her movements precise. I am to infiltrate Earth, evaluate their capabilities, and determine the necessity of neutralization. Councillor Zorgan gestured toward the holographic Earth. You will be inserted into New York City. Our simulations indicate it provides the most diverse data pool. Your physical modifications are complete, they will attribute your appearance to local trends. The male specimens will find you cooperative. Raina's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She was a soldier, an analyst, not a diplomat, let alone bait. But duty was paramount. 14 Earth days, the Grand Architect declared. Your assessment will be delivered promptly. Efficiency, precision, detachment. And Specialist Alistar, no unnecessary contact. Raina nodded. I will not fail the council. As she turned, a flicker of intrigue crossed her face as she looked at the swirling blue planet. Meanwhile, deep in the heart of Manhattan, Hank Wintermute was wrestling with his own existential crisis. Another round for table 6, Hank, Miguel, the bar owner, called out, his voice laced with friendly exasperation. And try to look like you enjoy your job, for once. People come here to forget their troubles, not drown in yours. Yeah, Hank mumbled, grabbing a tray. At 32, he was starting to feel the weight of his choices. 10 years slinging drinks at the Neon Dream, a speakeasy that was more style than substance, had left him unfulfilled. He navigated the crowded bar, the cloying mix of perfume, cheap whiskey, and desperation heavy in the air. He deposited the drinks, the customers barely acknowledging him, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones and their own self-importance. Back at the bar, Miguel was meticulously crafting a cocktail. Cheer up, buddy, he said, sliding a glass towards Hank. At least we're not stuck in some dead-end corporate job like those suits. Easy for you to say, Hank retorted. You're opening your own place next month. I'm still paying off Jessica's revolutionary pet psychology app. Miguel winced. Don't remind me. Look, you're wasting your talent here. Those cocktails you make, that's art, man. Hank shrugged. He did have a knack for it. A palate that could deconstruct the most complex flavors, a mind that could conjure up the most unlikely combinations. It was the one thing he had inherited from his father, along with a box of cryptic journals. William Wintermute had been a government scientist, a paranoid alcoholic who spent his days locked in his study, ranting about something. Non-terrestrial entities, classified contact protocols, Project Handshake. Hank had dismissed it all as the ramblings of a madman. Hey, Earth to Hank. Miguel snapped, pulling him from his thoughts. We got a live one. Hank followed Miguel's gaze. Standing in the doorway, bathed in the neon glow, was a woman who defied description. Her skin was an impossible shade of violet, her silver hair cascaded around her shoulders like liquid moonlight, and her eyes were emerald green, flecked with gold, burning with an intensity that made Hank's breath catch in his throat. Dibs, Miguel breathed. In your dreams, Hank replied, already moving towards the entrance. She moved with a strange grace, each step deliberate, as if calculating the precise amount of force required. She wore a simple black dress, but it somehow managed to look both expensive and utterly foreign. Welcome to the neon dream, Hank said, summoning his most charming smile. Up close, her skin was even more striking, a subtle luminescence that shifted with the light. Body modification, he told himself. Probably some European aristocrat slumming it in New York. I require a beverage, she stated, her voice melodic but oddly formal, with an accent he couldn't place. That's generally why people come to bars, Hank replied, fighting to maintain his composure. Any preferences? Sweet, sour, strong. She blinked, those incredible eyes focusing on him with laser-like intensity. I am unfamiliar with the options. I would appreciate a recommendation based on cultural significance. Definitely foreign, Hank thought. And loaded. In that case, he said, gesturing to a stool, let me introduce you to an American classic, with my own twist. She sat, her posture perfect, her hands resting precisely on her knees. My name is Raina. Hank Wintermute, he replied with a slight bow. At your service. So, Raina, where are you visiting from? I am, from abroad, she hesitated almost imperceptibly. Here to study American culture and behaviors. An anthropologist? Hank asked, raising an eyebrow. A flicker of something akin to amusement touched her lips. In a manner of speaking. Raina calculated that her cover story was holding. The human, Hank Wintermute, seemed to accept her explanation. Her neural implant was recording every detail of her surroundings, every nuance of human behavior. This bar, as they called it, appeared to be a vital social gathering point, despite the inefficient use of space and the overwhelming sensory input. She watched Wintermute's movements as he expertly combined liquids. According to her briefing, alcohol was a significant weakness in human society, a substance that impaired cognitive function. Yet, they consumed it willingly, for pleasure. Here you go, Wintermute said, placing a glass before her. It contained an amber liquid with floating vegetable matter and ice. A Wintermute old-fashioned. Bourbon infused with vanilla and orange peel bitters, a touch of maple instead of sugar, and a twist of lemon. Raina eyed the concoction warily. Her biological modifications would prevent intoxication, but she needed to maintain her cover. She lifted the glass, noting the way Wintermute watched her with anticipation. Is this a traditional ritual? She asked. Wintermute laughed, a sound that sent a strange shiver down her spine. Yeah, I guess you could call it that. Especially when the bartender's watching. Raina raised the glass to her lips and took a small sip. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Her enhanced taste receptors, designed to detect the faintest trace of poison, exploded with information. Sweet, bitter, smoky, fruity, complex layers of flavor cascaded through her neural pathways. Her pupils dilated involuntarily, and a small gasp escaped her lips. That good, huh? Wintermute asked, looking pleased. Good was an understatement. Her species consumed nutrition in efficient capsules, devoid of taste, designed solely for sustenance. The concept of flavor as pleasure was foreign, decadent, almost obscene. It is. She searched for an appropriate term. Extraordinary. She took another sip, larger this time. A wave of heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward to her limbs. Her implant registered elevated heart rate and dopamine levels. This wasn't just data collection, this was experience. Whoa, maybe slow down a bit if you're not used to drinking, Wintermute cautioned as she nearly finished the glass. I require another, Raina stated, pushing the empty glass forward. The directness of her demand caused Wintermute to raise his eyebrows. Coming right up. But this one's on the house. The building will not collapse from the weight of a beverage, she replied, confused. Wintermute laughed again, that sound that activated pleasure centers in her brain that should not be responding to audio stimuli. It means it's free. A gift. He began mixing another drink. I don't make this particular version for just anyone, you know. Only for special customers. Raina froze, her hand halfway to the new glass. Her cultural briefing flashed through her mind. In Etherian society, gifts were sacred. To create something unique for another, to declare them special, was the most significant declaration possible. A life bond commitment. She studied Wintermute's face. Had he just proposed to her? According to the strictest interpretation of her cultural traditions, yes, he had. You honor me greatly, she said carefully, trying to gauge if he understood the significance of his words. Just doing my job, he replied with a casual shrug that sent conflicting signals. Was human courtship more complex than her briefing had indicated? As she sipped the second drink, Raina felt something unprecedented, a conflict between mission parameters and personal interest. This human had inadvertently triggered a cultural response she had never expected to experience. And the beverage, the sensations it created were beyond anything in her training. Perhaps human weaknesses were more complicated than the council had anticipated. Hank couldn't take his eyes off her. He'd served countless beautiful women, but Raina was different. It wasn't just her exotic appearance, though God knows that was distracting enough. There was something in the way she experienced things, an intensity that made the jaded New Yorkers around her seem half asleep. So, he said, leaning against the bar, what do you think of our city so far? Raina took another delicate sip, her eyes closing briefly in what looked suspiciously like ecstasy. It is chaotic, inefficient, excessively stimulating. She opened her eyes, fixing him with that emerald gaze. Yet, fascinating. That's actually the perfect description of New York, Hank laughed. Been here long? I arrived today. And your first stop was a hidden speakeasy? You don't waste time. Time is a finite resource, she replied seriously. I was instructed that bars provide optimal settings for human behavioral observation. Hank raised an eyebrow. Instructed by who? Your tour guide. A flash of something akin to alarm crossed her face, quickly masked. My research advisor. I am studying social anthropology. It was a reasonable explanation, but something didn't quite add up. Her mannerisms were too formal, her reactions too intense for someone simply conducting academic research. But then again, who was he to judge? Maybe she was just socially awkward, or on the spectrum, or both. Well, Professor, he asked, deciding to play along. What have you observed so far? She considered the question with surprising gravity. Humans appear to seek physical proximity despite the discomfort it causes. They consume substances that impair cognitive function for recreational purposes. And they communicate much through non-verbal cues, which are often misleading. Hank chuckled. You've only been here a few hours, and you've already nailed it. Anything else strike you as odd? Raina paused, her gaze fixed on him. The concept of life-bonding rituals. The exchange of gifts as a precursor to mating. Hank felt a flush creep up his neck. Yeah, well, things are a little more complicated than that. It's not exactly a formal proposal. It's just a nice gesture. Raina tilted her head, her eyes searching his. A gesture with significant cultural implications. Hank swallowed hard. He was pretty sure he had just accidentally proposed to an alien. Or at least, a very strange, very beautiful, and very intense anthropologist. Look, he said, trying to defuse the situation. I didn't mean anything by it. I just make a damn good old-fashioned, and you seem to appreciate it. No strings attached. Reyna continued to stare at him, her expression unreadable. Hank had a feeling this was just the beginning of a very long, very strange night. The neon dream buzzed with late-night energy, but Reyna remained fixed on Hank, her mind racing to reconcile the conflicting information. Humans were illogical. Their social rituals were a tangled mess of unspoken rules and contradictory signals. She took another sip of her old-fashioned, the complex flavors a comforting anchor in the sea of confusion. No strings attached, she repeated, testing the phrase. Meaning, the gift does not imply a commitment. Hank shifted uncomfortably. Exactly. It's just, a drink. A token of appreciation. Nothing more. Reyna's internal processors whirred. Token. Appreciation. No commitment. She nodded slowly, storing the information. Thank you for clarifying. Despite Hank's reassurance, Reyna couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Her Etherean instincts, honed over generations of diplomatic negotiations, screamed that this human was withholding something. Was it deliberate deception, or simply a cultural blind spot? She decided to press further. Tell me more about these gestures. Are there other rituals I should be aware of? Hank sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. Look, it's not like there's a guidebook on human courtship. Everyone does things differently. Some people give flowers, some people write poems, some people buy expensive jewelry. Jewelry, Reyna echoed, her eyes widening slightly. Gems with inherent monetary value. A public display of resource acquisition. Hank chuckled. Yeah, you could put it that way. But it's more about the sentiment behind it. The thought that counts, you know. Sentiment. Another illogical human concept. Reyna stored the information, but her skepticism remained. And what about mating rituals, she asked, plunging into the deep end. What are the accepted protocols for procreation? Hank choked on his drink. Whoa, hold on a second. We just met. We're not exactly talking about that kind of stuff. Reyna's confusion deepened. But if the gift is not a commitment, and the sentiment is merely a token, then what is the purpose of these rituals? Hank threw his hands up in exasperation. I don't know. It's complicated. It's just how things are. Reyna realized she was getting nowhere. Human courtship was a Gordian knot of ambiguity and unspoken expectations. She needed a different approach. Perhaps I should observe these rituals firsthand, she said, a glint of determination in her eyes. Would you be willing to demonstrate? Hank's jaw dropped. Demonstrate? You mean, like, go on a date? Reyna tilted her head. Is that the appropriate terminology? A date. A structured social interaction designed to facilitate bonding. Hank swallowed hard. He was pretty sure he was way out of his depth. But something about Reyna's earnest curiosity, her genuine desire to understand, was endearing. And, let's be honest, he was hopelessly attracted to her. Sure, he said, his voice a little higher than usual. I guess I could demonstrate. Reyna's eyes lit up, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time. Excellent. When should we commence this date? Hank blinked. He hadn't expected her to be so enthusiastic. How about tomorrow night? I know a great little Italian place. Good food, good wine, minimal commitment. Reyna nodded. Tomorrow night it is. I will expect you to explain all the relevant customs and protocols. Hank gulped. He had a feeling he was in for a very interesting evening. As Reyna continued to absorb the human environment, Hank found himself increasingly captivated by her reactions to everything around her. The blaring car horns, the overflowing garbage cans, the sheer density of humanity, all of it was new and fascinating through her eyes. He started to feel an unexpected connection, a sense of responsibility to guide her through this strange and often bewildering world. The next evening, Hank found himself nervously waiting outside Reina's hotel. He had spent the entire day agonizing over what to wear, what to say, and how to avoid accidentally triggering another intergalactic life-bonding ritual. He finally settled on a casual but stylish outfit, hoping to strike the right balance between approachable and sophisticated. When Reina emerged from the hotel, Hank's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple dress, but it fit her perfectly, accentuating her otherworldly beauty. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, and her emerald eyes sparkled with anticipation. "You look." Hank started, then hesitated. What was the appropriate compliment in this situation? "Very nice," he finished lamely. Reina tilted her head, studying him. "You also appear presentable. Shall we proceed?" Hank grinned. He was definitely in over his head, but he was enjoying every minute of it. As they walked to the restaurant, Reina peppered Hank with questions. "Why do humans adorn themselves with scented oils? What is the purpose of this small talk you engage in? And why do you avoid direct eye contact when passing strangers?" Hank did his best to explain the illogical nuances of human behavior, but he could tell that Reina was still struggling to make sense of it all. He tried to focus on the lighter aspects of the culture, pointing out interesting architecture, sharing funny anecdotes, and generally trying to make her feel comfortable. At the restaurant, Reina's cultural confusion continued. She was fascinated by the menu, carefully analyzing each dish and asking detailed questions about the ingredients and preparation methods. She was equally perplexed by the concept of tipping, the unspoken expectation that customers should pay extra for good service. Throughout the meal, Hank found himself increasingly drawn to Reina. Her curiosity was infectious, her intelligence was razor-sharp, and her complete lack of pretense was refreshing. He realized that he wasn't just attracted to her physical beauty, he was genuinely fascinated by her mind. As the evening drew to a close, Hank walked Reina back to her hotel. He was nervous about what to say, what to do. Should he kiss her goodnight? Would that be considered an inappropriate advance, or a polite gesture? Reina seemed to sense his anxiety. "Hank," she said, stopping in front of the hotel entrance. "I must confess, I am still struggling to understand these human dates. But I am grateful for your guidance." Hank smiled. "I'm glad I could help. Perhaps," Reina continued, her eyes locking with his, "we could continue this demonstration tomorrow?" Hank's heart skipped a beat. "I'd like that very much," he said, his voice barely a whisper. As Reina turned to enter the hotel, Hank couldn't resist. He reached out and gently touched her arm. "Reina," he said, "I know this might sound crazy, but I think you're amazing." Reina stopped, her eyes widening slightly. "Amazing?" she repeated, testing the word. "Is that a positive assessment?" Hank laughed. "Definitely positive. You're smart, you're funny, you're beautiful, and you're completely unlike anyone I've ever met." Reina considered his words carefully. "I find your assessment intriguing. Perhaps further study is required." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the hotel. Hank stood there for a moment, a goofy grin plastered across his face. He had a feeling that his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. Back in her hotel room, Reina accessed her private comm channel. "Counselor Lyra," she said, her voice formal and precise. "I request a status update on Project Handshake." The image of Counselor Lyra flickered on the screen. "Project Handshake remains dormant, Specialist Ollie Star. The human scientist, William Wintermute, is deceased. His research is considered inconclusive." Reina frowned. "Inconclusive? But his journals, His theories about interspecies communication, they suggest a potential for collaboration. Counselor Lyra shook her head. William Wintermute was a paranoid eccentric. His work is irrelevant. Focus on your primary objective, Specialist Ollie Starr. Assess the threat level and report your findings. Reyna hesitated. But what if there is more to this than we realize? What if humans are not simply a threat, but also an opportunity? Counselor Lyra's eyes narrowed. Do not allow yourself to be swayed by sentiment, Specialist Ollie Starr. Your duty is to the Council. Do not forget it. The screen went blank. Reyna stood alone in her room, the weight of her mission pressing down on her. Was she truly capable of remaining objective? Could she condemn an entire species based on the limited data she had gathered? And what about Hank? Was he just a subject for her research, or was there something more between them? Reyna knew that she was walking a dangerous line. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of discovering something extraordinary, something that could change the fate of both humanity and the Etherean. Days turned into a whirlwind of cultural exchanges and deepening connections. Reyna and Hank explored the city, Reyna still documenting and analyzing, and Hank relishing the way she saw Earth with fresh eyes. But under the surface, tensions were rising. The Etherean High Council grew impatient, and Reyna felt the weight of their expectations. One afternoon, while browsing a used bookstore, Reyna stumbled upon a familiar symbol etched into the cover of a dusty volume. It was the emblem of Project Handshake, the secret government initiative her superiors dismissed as inconsequential. Intrigued, she bought the book and retreated to her hotel room to decipher its contents. As she pored over the book's cryptic pages, she realized it was a heavily coded journal belonging to Hank's father, William Wintermute. The entries detailed William's attempts to establish contact with an extraterrestrial race, his growing paranoia about government interference, and his desperate hope for a peaceful exchange of knowledge. Reyna was stunned. Was it possible that William had been on the verge of a breakthrough? And if so, why had the Etherean High Council suppressed his research? Was there a hidden agenda at play? Meanwhile, Hank was grappling with his own set of revelations. He had started researching his father's work, driven by Reyna's persistent questions and his own growing curiosity. He discovered a hidden compartment in his father's study, containing a collection of documents, photographs, and audio recordings related to Project Handshake. As he listened to the recordings, he heard his father's voice, filled with a mix of excitement and fear. William spoke of encounters with extraterrestrial beings, advanced technology, and the potential for both destruction and enlightenment. He warned of a looming threat, a powerful force that sought to control humanity and suppress its potential. Hank was overwhelmed. Was his father's paranoia justified? Was Reyna somehow connected to this extraterrestrial force? He knew he had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. That evening, Reyna and Hank met at their favorite bar. Hank could sense that something was troubling Reyna. She seemed distant, preoccupied. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You seem different." Reyna hesitated. She knew she should report her findings to the council, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was betraying Hank's trust. "I have discovered information," she said carefully. "Information that could complicate our relationship." Hank's heart sank. Was this it? Was Reyna about to reveal her true purpose, to shatter the fragile bond they had formed? "What kind of information?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Reyna took a deep breath. "Your father," she said. "William Wintermute. He was involved in a project called Handshake." Hank's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" Reyna explained what she had found in William's journal, her voice laced with concern. "The Etherean High Council dismissed his work as inconsequential," she said. "But I believe they were wrong. I think your father was onto something important." Hank was silent for a moment, processing the information. "My father was a paranoid alcoholic," he said finally. He spent his life chasing shadows. I don't know what to believe anymore. I understand your skepticism, Reyna said. But I have seen the evidence. I have read his words. I believe your father was trying to protect humanity from a great danger. Hank looked at Reyna, his eyes searching hers. And you? What do you believe? Reyna hesitated. I am conflicted, she said. My duty is to the council. But I cannot ignore the evidence before me. I believe that humanity deserves a chance. And I believe that your father's work holds the key to your survival. Hank reached out and took Reyna's hand. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with emotion. Thank you for believing in him. Thank you for believing in me. As they sat there, hand in hand, they knew that they were on the verge of a dangerous journey. They had to uncover the truth about Project Handshake, expose the Etherian High Council's agenda, and protect humanity from the looming threat. But they couldn't do it alone. Back on Etheria, Counselor Zorgan addressed the High Council. Specialist Alistair's assessment is overdue. Her communication channels have been erratic. I suspect she has been compromised. Counselor Lyra nodded in agreement. Her prolonged exposure to human culture has clearly affected her judgment. We must take decisive action. The Grand Architect remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the holographic Earth. Prepare the fleet, he said finally. It is time to eliminate the threat. And if Specialist Ollie Starr has strayed from her duty, she will be dealt with accordingly. The race against time intensified as Hank and Reyna delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding Project Handshake. Hank scoured his father's documents, deciphering coded messages and piecing together fragments of information. Reyna, using her advanced technology, accessed restricted databases and analyzed classified files. They discovered that Project Handshake was not just about establishing contact with extraterrestrial life, it was about preparing for a potential invasion. William Wintermute had uncovered evidence of a hostile alien force, known as the Virax Collective, that sought to conquer Earth and exploit its resources. The Etherian High Council, aware of the Virax threat, had initially supported Project Handshake. But when William Wintermute began to uncover the Virax's weaknesses, the Council feared that he was becoming too powerful, too independent. They shut down Project Handshake, discredited William, and suppressed his research. Reyna was horrified by the Council's betrayal. They had prioritized their own power and control over the safety of humanity. She knew she had to do everything in her power to expose their deception and warn Earth of the impending invasion. Meanwhile, Hank was struggling to reconcile his father's paranoia with the reality of the situation. He had always dismissed William as a delusional madman, but now he realized that his father had been right all along. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. He knew he had to step up and protect the world from the threat his father had warned him about. One night, while working late in his father's study, Hank discovered a hidden map, detailing a network of underground bunkers scattered throughout New York City. He realized that his father had been preparing a secret resistance, a group of individuals dedicated to fighting the Virax Collective. Hank decided to seek out these resistance fighters and join their cause. He knew he couldn't face the Virax alone. He needed allies, resources, and a plan. Reyna, using her Etherian technology, detected a fleet of Virax warships approaching Earth. The invasion was imminent. She knew she had to act fast. She contacted the Etherian High Council, demanding an explanation for their deception. Counselor Zorgan responded, his voice cold and dismissive. Specialist Ollie Starr, he said, you have betrayed your duty. You have sided with the humans. You are now an enemy of the Etherian. Reyna was undeterred. You are making a mistake, she said. The Virax are a threat to all sentient life. We must unite to fight them. Counselor Zorgan laughed. The Etherian will not align with a primitive species like humanity. We will conquer them, exploit their resources, and crush any resistance. You have chosen the wrong side, Specialist Ollie Star. Prepare to face the consequences. The communication channel went dead. Reyna knew that the Etherian High Council had abandoned Earth to its fate. She had to find a way to warn the world, to rally the resistance, and to prepare for the coming battle. She contacted Hank, urging him to gather the resistance fighters and prepare for an attack. The Virax are coming, she said. We have to be ready. Hank, with newfound resolve, contacted his father's network of underground bunkers. He gathered the resistance fighters, a motley crew of scientists, hackers, and former military personnel. They were armed with makeshift weapons, outdated technology, and a burning desire to protect their home. As the Virax warships entered Earth's atmosphere, Reyna and Hank stood side by side, ready to face the enemy. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they refused to surrender. They would fight to the last breath to defend humanity and prove that Earth was worth saving. The Virax invasion descended upon Earth with brutal force. Cities crumbled under the weight of laser fire, and the skies turned black with the smoke of destruction. The resistance fighters, led by Hank, launched a desperate counterattack, using their knowledge of the underground bunkers to strike at the Virax from the shadows. Reyna, torn between her loyalty to the Etherian and her love for Hank, made a fateful decision. She chose to defy the High Council and fight alongside humanity. Using her advanced technology, she hacked into the Virax communication network, disrupting their strategies and weakening their defenses. The battle raged on, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. The Virax's superior firepower was offset by the resistance fighters' ingenuity and determination. Reyna's technological prowess proved invaluable, allowing the resistance to anticipate the Virax's movements and exploit their weaknesses. As the battle reached its climax, Hank and Reyna found themselves facing the Virax commander, a towering figure of immense power. The commander unleashed a devastating energy blast, threatening to obliterate them both. Just as the blast was about to strike, Reyna activated a hidden device, a prototype weapon developed by William Wintermute. The device emitted a powerful electromagnetic pulse, disrupting the Virax's technology in neutralizing their weapons. The Virax commander, weakened and vulnerable, was no match for Hank and Reyna. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and love, finally defeating the commander and scattering the Virax forces. With the Virax threat neutralized, Reyna contacted the Etherian High Council, demanding a ceasefire. She presented them with irrefutable evidence of the Virax's brutality and their threat to all sentient life. The Council, faced with the reality of the situation, finally relented. They agreed to a ceasefire and opened negotiations with Earth's representatives. In the aftermath of the invasion, Reyna and Hank worked together to rebuild Earth and forge a new alliance between humanity and the Etherian. They established a joint research program, based on William Wintermute's work, to explore the potential for interspecies communication and cooperation. The Etherian High Council, recognizing the value of Reyna's insights and Hank's leadership, appointed them as ambassadors to their respective worlds. They traveled between Earth and Etheria, promoting understanding, fostering collaboration, and building a bridge between two vastly different cultures. Years passed, and the alliance between humanity and the Etherian flourished. They shared knowledge, technology, and resources, working together to create a better future for all. Reyna and Hank, their love deepening with each passing year, became symbols of hope and unity. They proved that even the most disparate species could find common ground, that even the deepest divisions could be overcome with trust, understanding, and a shared commitment to peace. And so, the story of Reyna and Hank, the alien anthropologist and the Earth bartender, became a legend, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the enduring spirit of humanity. They had faced a galactic threat, defied their own people, and built a bridge between worlds. And in doing so, they had saved not only Earth but also the Etherian, ushering in an era of peace and prosperity that would last for generations to come. Their crossed wires had created an unexpected spark, igniting a new chapter in the history of the galaxy.